Hi, I'll show you how I make sourdough bread from scratch in today's video. I made the starter and my first loaf during the pandemic in 2020, and for the past 4 years, I've been learning, simplifying, and perfecting this amazing process. I'll teach you what took me 4 years to learn in just a few minutes. So sit back and relax, and let's dive in. And yes, I said relax because you don't need to take any notes. All the equipment that you will need and the detailed recipe can be found in the description below. For this video's sake, I assume you have a starter. If you don't, let me know and we'll fix that issue. So, it's day 1 and it's 7 a.m. The first thing that we need to do is to refresh our starter. So measure 50 grams of starter and place it in a small mixing bowl. To that, we will add 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. My starter is whole grain, so I feed it with a whole grain flour. And also make sure your water is warm temperature. This step reactivates the microbes that will ferment your dough. I transfer this mixture to a jar and just lightly cover it with a lid and leave it at a room temperature for 6 to 8 hours. You just want your starter to double in size, and then think of this as a waking up your natural yeast. So around 2:30 p.m. we're gonna mix our dough. By now, your starter should have signs of readiness. It should have risen moderately in its containers and have bubbles on top and sides, and has this loose consistency and sour aroma. You can also perform the float test to ensure your starter is ready. You do that just by dropping a really small piece of starter into a water, and then if it floats, you're good to go. Also in this video, I'll show you 2 versions of the recipe. One is whitish loaf and the other one is whole grain bread. So let's start with the recipe number 1, the white loaf. In a large bowl, add 280 grams of water and 100 grams of active starter. This creates the liquid base, evenly distributing the yeast and bacteria throughout the dough. To that, we will sift 300 grams of white flour and 100 grams of whole wheat flour. White flour provides a structure, and then the whole wheat flour is going to add complexity and a flavor. You just want to mix until all the ingredients are incorporated using your hand or spatula. You don't need to overmix it. The dough should feel firm, yet kind of sticky, but it should not be soupy or runny. Cover the bowl with a plastic wrap, or I love to use a shower cap, and let the dough rest for 45 to 60 minutes on a room temperature. For the loaf number 2, we will start the same way. So we'll mix 280 grams of water and 100 grams of starter. But to that, we're gonna add 200 grams of whole wheat flour. Again, we're gonna make sure to sift it. 100 grams of rye flour and 100 grams of white flour. Just like before, mix until all ingredients are incorporated. Cover it and set aside. At this point, I also like to feed the remainder of my starter in ratios 1 to 1 to 1. So 50 grams of starter, 50 grams of water, 50 grams of flour. And I will transfer it to a jar, loosely cover with a lid, and then let it get active again. And then I'm gonna place it in the fridge until I am ready to bake again. More about starter in some of the future videos. After 1 hour, we are doing slap and fold. I must admit, this is my least favorite of the steps because at the end of it, both my hands and my back are kind of sore. So we're gonna add 8 grams of salt and splash of water. Salt is gonna enhance the flavor, but also is gonna strengthen the gluten structure, which is gonna give our bread that chewy texture. We're gonna mix the dough using slap and fold method for 10-ish minutes to build the strength. So what you do is literally slap your dough against the work surface and then fold it onto itself. And repeat this for, again, as long as you can, up to 10 minutes. During this time, gluten should activate, and then as you work the dough, texture will progress from like very sticky to smoother and more elastic. So once this is done, place the dough back in the bowl, cover it, and let it rest for another 20 minutes. This and all the following steps are exactly the same whether you choose to make version 1, so more white dough, or version 2. And I will show them interchangeably. 20 minutes later, we're gonna do stretch and fold. So you're gonna turn the dough onto a wet work surface and then gently stretch it into a rectangle. This is optional, but I love to sprinkle the stretched dough with the seeds like sesame, flax, chia, whatever I have on hand. And then you want to fold it kind of like an envelope, so left over right and then right over left, top down and bottom up. This technique is going to distribute the yeast and it's going to strengthen the dough and encourage even fermentation. Place the dough back in the bowl, cover it, and then let it rest for 30 minutes. We are moving to some very easy steps, and first one is coil fold. This is very gentle method to further develop strength and structure. We will do this 3 to 4 times, and in between each folding session, we're gonna let the dough rest for 30 minutes. Make sure your hands are wet, and then grab the dough kind of underneath in the middle and then pull it upwards and then let it fold onto itself. And then you just repeat this on both sides and then cover and let it rest. So you're going to do one coil and fold, wait 30 minutes, another coil and fold, wait 30 minutes, another coil and fold, and then either at this point you're gonna wait another 30 minutes and do another one, or if you're just done with it, you're gonna actually let it rest for 1.5 to 2 hours. And this step is just called a bulk fermentation phase. And during this phase, the dough is gonna rise and the flavor is gonna really deepen. At this point, the yeast is gonna convert sugars into carbon dioxide and they're gonna create a very airy structure that we love in a sourdough. So after the bulk fermentation phase, we're gonna do shaping. This is one of my favorites, and this is the last step for this day. So we're gonna prepare the dough for its final rise. Lightly flour your work surface and Benetton basket, or they call them also proofing baskets. Or if you don't have them, you can just use medium bowls and then put the clean kitchen towels on top of them. I like to use brown rice flour for this purpose, but you can also use whatever flour you have on hand. Lightly flour work surface, as I said, and then tops of your loaves, and then also your hands. And then flip the dough over so the top is now facing down. If your dough is very compact and tight, you're gonna have to use both of your hands to gently stretch it outwards and in all directions to form a slightly larger round. Using both hands, you're gonna grab the bottom edge closest to you and then fold it up to the middle, pressing gently so it sticks. And then repeat to the left side, folding it up and slightly inward. And then the dough should be folded onto a really neat shape. And then rotate the dough using both hands and then slightly push away the dough and drag it towards you, creating the tension with your hands. And you're gonna repeat this like movement of like pushing it away and then dragging it towards you until the surface of the dough is very, very smooth. Then I like to kind of like grab the dough at the bottom and flip it over into some sesame seeds. So I make sure that the crust gets a lot of sesame seeds, but this is also optional. From there, you just want to scoop the one piece of the dough and flip it over into the prepared proofing basket. Again, making sure that that sesame seed top and the top that we kind of created the smooth surface for is on the bottom of the basket. So the seam side is facing up. I also like to pinch the dough at this point. And we're gonna let the dough rest at room temperature for around 20 minutes. And then I like to cover proofing basket and transfer it to refrigerator for 12 hours. Cold fermentation slows down the process, allowing the flavors to develop further and making the dough easier to handle when baking. It's a day 2 morning around 7 a.m. So you want to preheat your oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit with a Dutch oven inside. This step creates a super hot environment that mimics kind of like a professional bakery oven, and it will ensure a really good oven spring. Let it heat for around 30 minutes to an hour. Once the Dutch oven is preheated and ready, then we're going to remove the dough from the refrigerator. Place the parchment paper on top of your Benetton basket and then flip it over and rest the dough on a work surface. Dust off any excess flour and then score the dough. This is usually what I do. I just make like one large indentation in the middle, but like kind of making a C shape. Scoring, it's not just decorative, it also allows the bread to expand properly during baking. So make sure you make a long and deeper cuts. Once you scored your dough, carefully remove your Dutch oven and set it on a safe surface. It is going to be extremely hot. So use the parchment paper edges to lift the loaf and transfer the dough to the Dutch oven. Cover it and then bake it for 20 minutes. This is going to trap the steam, which helps create a crispy and shiny crust. After 20 minutes, we're gonna remove the lid, lower the temperature to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, and then bake it for another 15 to 18 minutes. I usually leave it for 18 minutes until the crust turns golden brown. And then you're gonna turn off the oven and crack the door open and then let the loaf sit for additional 20 minutes to set the crust and cool slowly. Place the baked loaves on a wire rack and let them cool for 1 to 2 hours before slicing. It's very important to allow bread to cool completely before slicing because you're gonna prevent gummy interior and then also you're gonna let the bread fully develop the flavor. And that is it. I usually keep the bread out in a paper bag for a day or two. And then if it lasts longer, I place it in a fridge, in a Ziploc bag and in the fridge. Bread is still delicious days after baking. I promise you, I love the bread, but I usually eat 1 to 2 slices a day, which means that this bread lasts 6-7 days in my house. And all you need to do is lightly toast it until the edges are crispy and then the middle gets warm and soft. I promise you, it tastes as good as first day. This is my sourdough process. It's a video that was a long time coming. I hope it helps. Please let me know your questions, concerns in the comments below. If you appreciated this video, let me know by liking it. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video.